But to get back to the title that we ended up with, Building a Resilient Tompkins County, the plan embodies those things we need to do, and we'll talk about a few of them tonight, to become more resilient to change. And although we knew these things were somewhat more important in 2004, since then it's become probably even more apparent. Certainly climate change is something this community believes is real. And the challenge it faces is even greater when there are so many people that deny that it's real in places where important decisions get made. There's certainly the economic downturn and disruptions, and what we're seeing today with energy prices going up really speak to the need for communities to become resilient to those kind of stresses. And ongoing and sometimes ignored because it's too difficult to even acknowledge is the stress we're putting on our natural systems all the time. And it's getting worse and worse to the point of threatening the diversity of life on the planet. So we know those things are all there, and we're trying to build a community that is resilient in the face of those things. When we did the comprehensive plan, we had, and hopefully if you haven't seen it, you'll go to our website and take a look at it. But we addressed a lot of important issues in the community based on what we heard from people and based on their feedback as to what they thought we should be doing about it as a community. And when we had completed it, we realized this really embodies the community's vision for the future. This really does state pretty clearly what this community is about and what it wants. And so, as a kind of an add-on to the document, I drafted a foreword to the document that kind of encompassed that vision. I just want to run through a few of the things in there to kind of set the context for this discussion tonight. It basically says that this is the kind of community we envision and we hope to achieve, and that we hope this plan can help us to achieve. And one of the things we recognized in the plan was housing is a real concern in this community. So we envisioned an improved housing supply that both created greater diversity of housing to meet the needs of changing demographics in the community, aging of the baby boomers, the need to keep young people here, and also increase the supply and hopefully contribute in that way to greater affordability, because a lot of people just quite frankly can't afford to live here. We also recognize that people are concerned about traffic, and that this plan envisions traffic congestion being mitigated by having housing, employment, and other services that people need to access located near one another, and connected by, where they're not directly adjacent, at least connected by options other than the automobile. A good transit system, we have an excellent one to build upon, and pedestrian paths and trails that link our housing areas to where we need to get services and work. We also envisioned a local economy with even greater opportunity. Support for entrepreneurs, it's right in here, believe it or not. And educational opportunity that allows people to have meaningful employment that pays a fair wage. Recognizing that we're a community built on the education industry and the institutions here, and they continue to be the center of our community, but we build on the other assets too, including our culture, our natural beauty, that draw people here. We also, in the plan, envision a rural community that's thriving. Rural areas have been declining in many respects, overlooked in others for a long time, and we see a rural revitalization based on sustainable use of agricultural and forest resources, diversity in the agricultural sector. We heard a lot about that if you were here at the last scene presentation. And multiple benefits to local communities that result from that. Clean Cayuga Lake is at the center of this vision. It's a thing we look at, most of us, every day. And how do we get there? Well, one of the ways is by green belting all the streams in the county so that there's buffer and filtering that goes on before the water gets to the lake. We envision a landscape that really looks a lot like it does today. I think people love the beauty and the landscape that we're part of here. And in order to maintain that landscape, we envision a greater percentage of the land in protected areas. We actually have a vision of up to 20% of the land being protected, natural areas and forest lands, and maintaining a strong agricultural landscape with at least a third of our land maintained in active agriculture. We envision livable neighborhoods and vibrant communities, thriving employment centers, and they're all integrated to one another and together, again with connectivity and whether it be pedestrian, transit, or otherwise. We see our growth concentrated in existing centers largely, in the city's villages and hamlets, with a few new villages emerging in places that are strategic. And finally, we see better cooperation and collaboration between levels of government, amongst municipalities, and between the public and private sector, so that we actually become more efficient and actually lower the costs of doing business and living in the community to everyone's benefit. So that's kind of the vision that we had in the plan. And I'm probably behind on my slides already. But that's a slide that should have been up there while I was talking about the vision. But this is what we care about, right? I mean, this is what we live here for. And to try to make that vision a reality, we've come up with some strategies. We're in the process of developing some of these. Some of these are already in place. But the four that the county planning department is very engaged in are these: housing, conservation, energy, and development focus areas. And we're going to talk about each of those a little bit. There are three others that our partners in the community take primary responsibility for: transportation, the Ithaca Tompkins County Transportation Council, economic development with Tompkins County Area Development, and tourism with the Strategic Tourism Planning Board. We're going to be getting a little more involved in that in the planning department this year. But those are strategies that are in place that do go through updates just like ours do. First, I'm going to talk about housing. Joan and Katie will talk about the other three. When we recognized in the comprehensive plan that housing was a real problem, affordable housing in particular, but housing in general, people had difficulty finding housing they felt good about in this community, we realized we had to better understand the issue. And in order to address it, we needed to kind of quantify it. So we did a housing needs assessment, which we brought in a consultant, looked at the data, where population, growth, what's the lack of housing units in the community today, and we came to the conclusion that there was about a deficit over 10 years. There'd be a deficit of 4,000 housing units that aren't here today that would be needed, and that over half of those units would need to be affordable people that were at the middle or below in income. So and we also found that over the past 10 to 20 years, the percentage of housing being supplied, new housing that was affordable to folks in that range, was negligible compared to the total. So we knew we had to do something different if we were hoping to achieve a housing stock here that met the needs of people in the community. And so based on that assessment, we started talking with people involved in housing and local government, and some major employers in the community, and developed a housing strategy. This housing strategy was subsequently endorsed by the county legislature, by the city of Ithaca, and some other communities. And it has a number of key points. We said, how do we get more housing? How do we get more affordable housing? Well, one way you can do this is through land use regulatory tools. And so we identified 2 that have been used in other places to varying degrees of success, inclusionary and incentive zoning. It's where you build some affordable units into new development as it occurs, to put it simply. And that's something that it's a difficult thing to pull off because of market conditions and a number of other factors, but people are working on these concepts in the community now. Another was a community housing trust. This is a concept that existed in several other communities around the country where it was kind of a co-ownership of the housing, where a non-for-profit shared in the ownership and therefore reduced the cost of the housing to the homeowner. They own the home, but they basically don't own the land the home is on. It stays with the housing trust entity. And that tool we thought had potential in this community. We also recognize that employers have a need to get engaged. It's their staff, their employees who are commuting long distances to their work, and that's not to their advantage, really. That makes it difficult to get to work sometimes. It makes it stressful for people. They aren't perhaps as productive or happy as they could be as employees. So employer assistance was identified. And then a community housing affordability fund. For those people that wanted to develop housing in the community, we understood there were upfront costs that they had difficulty coming up with the funding to get a project off the ground, particularly affordable housing. So that was identified as another potential strategy if we could find a way to help those people. And the thing we've been working on and brought to fruition over the last couple of years is what's called the Housing Fund, and it addresses 2 of those strategies, the housing affordability and the housing trust. And we now have a program in place that's a partnership between the City of Ithaca, Tompkins County, and Cornell University that makes available $400,000 a year in funding to support housing trust program and housing affordability program in this community. And that is starting to make a difference. Ithaca Neighborhood Housing Services was also thinking about the housing trust idea and has moved forward aggressively with it, and has, I don't know whether this directly influenced their decision, but it certainly has supported their decision to do that. And as a result of having this housing fund in place for just over a little bit over a year right now, we have approved funding for 5 projects in the community. These projects would support 162 new affordable housing units in the community and providing $560,000 in funding for both the affordability program, which is a loan program to get projects off the ground, and the trust program, which is a grant to permanently underwrite the cost of that housing. So this is one example of how we've taken the issue identified in the comprehensive plan and taken that through the process of developing a strategy to start to make a difference on the ground in the community. And that is where we're headed. We think the strategic approach to implementation of the county comprehensive plan is a way that we can work with others in the community in a collaborative way. And now I'm going to turn this over to Katie Borgella, who's going to talk about a couple of the other ways that we're doing this.
Standing over here. So I get the chance to talk to you tonight about planning for conservation of the natural features and agricultural resources. And I just wanted to point out that this is not some stock photo of a cute calf. That's actually a local calf from a farm in Lansing, Lisa Stuttle, the Luteland farm out in Lansing. Dryden. Oh, sorry, Dryden. Yes, thank you. But it's still local. So our conservation planning was around those 2 areas. As you can see,